Hello there. So my name is Karel. Today we're talking about mechanical keyboards. So I'm going to try to keep this short. It's going to be a bit of an information dump regardless. I'm actually meant to put this slide a bit forward, but everything related to mechanical keyboards is a rabbit hole. So pretty much with every slide is going to be a very, very quick summary, and pretty much every subject matter is going to be a rabbit hole on its own. So you could have like a whole series of lectures and basically not even scratch the surface of things. So what about keyboards? So for computers, the history of keyboards is fairly simple. We used to have mechanical typewriters for people who do a lot of typing. And at one point, they started making computers, and for computers, they made keyboards. So two things. First, nobody really cared about cheap keyboards. So the first keyboards were built like tanks, and they were also expensive, expensive as hell. And they were also built for typewriting, people who use typewriters, so typewriters. And because of that, they were all really built with completely different design choices. So the feeling of the keyboard was completely different to what we have today. Over time, however, we couldn't actually afford building $600 keyboards for computers anymore, so keyboards slowly moved to completely different designs. So instead of having so on the top left there is a typewriter, and on the right here is the Model F keyboard, which is the keyboard with the switches that is the gold standard in mechanical keyboards. This is the keyboard that everything else is compared against. So this is the Model M, the Model F, and they later made a cheaper version, the Model M, which uses a slightly different switch design. I'll have a slide with the switch design in the next slide. Over time, they moved over to a rubber dome design. So that made keyboards a lot cheaper, but keyboards got like really mushy, and they were not really nice to type on. And that also resulted in what is probably considered the worst keyboard ever to type on, which is these rubber rollable keyboard thingies. These are also a rubber dome. It is kind of nice that you can make one of these because the materials are all soft, but typing on it is absolutely horrible. I think we might even have one lying around here, but it's horrible. So on the left is the switch of the original type, the Model F keyboard from IBM. And what makes it different is that, and on the right here is the rubber dome keyboards of today. So the main difference is that on the left it used, it's called a buckling spring keyboard, or a buckling spring switch. And it uses a buckling spring to create the mechanical actuation. And it offers a really nice finger feel. We actually have a Model F keyboard, a new one over there in the corner, but that's a different topic. And on the right is the rubber dome keyboards, and they're basically just rubber domes that just collapse, and they're really mushy feeling and not great. But the upside of that is these are really cheap, like dirt cheap. So these can be made for, well, these keyboards probably cost like less than what just the switches on a mechanical keyboard would. And the types of keyboards that used the buckling spring switches were like hundreds, and if not even more, dollars when they first came out.
500.
Something like 500, yes, and it's insane. Though considering all that, it's actually not that much cheaper. So between the crazy, insane mechanical keyboards of Model F and the rubber dome keyboards, there was also other types of keyboards. So one of the most famous ones are Cherry, a company called Cherry, with their own switches called the Cherry MX switches. And they were sort of operating in the background for a while. They've actually been making keyboards for a very long time, something like since the 80s. But they actually became very famous over the last over the last decade or so, when a bunch of video gamers decided that they discovered that, hey, these are actually really nice switches, and they offer a completely different feel from a rubber dome keyboard. From there, it's kind of spread like wildfire. There are actually a lot of other switch manufacturers and a lot of other switch designs, but because Cherry MX, these are the Cherry MX switches, they're very They're the most common ones. And also recently, the patents for the Cherry MX switches expired. So now there are like lots of manufacturers of switches that are almost either exactly the same, very similar, or just are compatible with Cherry MX keyboards that use these switches. So these days, Cherry is not even considered the best switches, but they are still the most popular ones. And before the patent expired, there used to be other manufacturers as well, but they were like violating patent law, so you couldn't import them in EU, so you could like buy them off like AliExpress, like cheap Chinese clones. But yeah, these days the other manufacturers are actually in some ways doing a better job of making these switches. But yeah, the simple, to very briefly summarize the different kinds of switches is there's basically three different kinds. There's the linear ones, so every switch just goes smoothly up and down. There's tactile ones, so where when you press the switch down, there's actually a little bump, so you can feel when the switch is switching. And the crazier ones also have like a clickiness to it, so you can, when you press it, you feel the clickiness. And between Cherry and all the other manufacturers, there's like a whole spectrum of different combinations of tactility and clickiness and smoothness and switch weight. So it has a spring in here, so you can change out the spring if you want, make it heavier, and it's like I said, rabbit hole, everything. And yeah, so at first there was like some more bigger manufacturers making cheaper mechanical keyboards for gaming, but from there it just spread like wildfire, and today we have custom mechanical keyboards that basically come in all shapes and sizes and colors, and it's absolutely crazy. I also mentioned that there are other switch manufacturers as well that are not Cherry MX switches. They're actually different form factors and everything, but they're a lot less common, and I'm not going down all the rabbit holes. So yeah, it's really crazy. And something that also needs to be mentioned with these mechanical keyboards is they're expensive. So part of it has to do with because they're still a niche thing. Even though it has actually gotten a lot better, it has become a lot more mainstream in the last years. In the last few years, it's still very much a niche thing. It's all the production runs are really small runs, so that makes things more expensive. But they're also expensive just because they're built to a higher standard than the average gaming mechanical keyboard. And yeah, so just as an example, one of my keyboards here is probably something like 300 plus euros, and I made the case myself. Like a good quality aluminum case, it already is like 100 euros. Like a set of switches probably goes like 50 euros or such. So, and yeah, that's just the crazy thing is that even just a switch set already costs more than just a cheap classical rubber dome keyboard. There is also a lot of snake oil, so it's a hobby where there's a lot of opinionated people on with lots of different things about the keyboard that all make a small difference. But overall, I can say with confidence that yes, these keyboards are not just like 10 times more expensive than a normal one. They are actually also better in every single way. Just the question is how much. And yeah. So, if you want to make a keyboard, what do we need to do? There's quite a lot of things that you need to decide with the keyboard. That's one part of what makes these kind of appealing is they're like infinitely customizable. And so we're just going to go from down bottom up, basically. First thing, what size of a keyboard you want to make? So the traditional keyboards usually have what are called the 100% keyboard sizes. These are really big, and actually the reason that I built my first mechanical keyboard is actually one, a smaller one. And turns out that if you just want to buy a ready-made product, there aren't too many smaller ones, weren't actually too many smaller ones available. And that's when Arti here said to me like the fatal words, that why not build your own? And it's been downhill ever since. But yeah, all joking aside, usually it's the the reference size is the 100% or the full size one, and it's just smaller from there. There are some bigger ones as well, but they're a lot less common. The most common mechanical keyboard form factor is the 60% one, so that does not have the numpad, it doesn't have the 10 keys, it doesn't have even the home up, page down keys. It's what's usually considered the smallest functional keyboard, but you're going to have to use a lot of modifier combinations to get all the keys. My favorite one, it used to be this is the 75% keyboard, so this actually has all the keys except the numpad, but it's in a more compact form factor, so it actually still has the page up and page down.
Actually, I'm pretty sure that 75% is actually missing a couple of keys compared to 10 keys.
Yeah, okay, so that's a good point. So this 75 is actually missing. It depends on what you need. So there's a lot of like, first thing is you don't actually usually need all of the keys, so you don't necessarily need the scroll lock key that's usually in a 100% keyboard. And the other thing is there's also some variance in different manufacturers. So there might be something missing, but for me at least, the most common ones like that I use a lot, like page up, page down, home end, these are all here, but they're just in a smaller form factor. And actually the size that I've recently started to like more is the 65% one. So this doesn't actually have the function keys, but they can like really easily be mapped to the number keys. So that especially important for me is the size, because usually I work with lots of embedded things and lots of external computers. So I need to usually have 2 keyboards on my table at work. So having just either 2 keyboards like side by side like this is like fairly normal, but having 2 keyboards like the 100% sizes together, it just takes up like crazy amount of desk space. So that's part of why I started looking for a new keyboard in the first place. And yeah, there's actually smaller ones as well. I actually have a PCB unfinished keyboard for a 40% one. This basically just has the letters and that's it, nothing else. It's insane to use, but you know, it can be done.
Just a random question. Let's say if you have the 60% layout, how do you work on a shell where you like I use arrow buttons?
Yeah,
history, so
yeah. That's the actually 60% one I think has depends. You can actually have arrow keys on it as well. Yeah, that's why I don't like the smaller ones all the time. If you're a programmer, probably not.
key or something.
What do you mean? I have them here.
No, I mean like let's say if you use the 60%, what do you do with arrow keys?
You can map them here. We almost fit the 60 arrow keys in here. There are like different designs, but usually you can just use like. I'll get to the software later a little bit. I'm not going to go too much, but you can basically. Because they usually use like very common microcontrollers in them, you can basically write completely custom software and you can basically map it to anything you want. So you can just do, you could actually in the keyboard firmware, you could just even use the like Vim arrow keys, just map them behind the modifier, and you can do that. It's really up to the user. So moving on. Next thing, so you have decided how big of a keyboard you want to make. Now you need to decide on the case and rabbit hole. So these are just simple tray mounts. So this is just a box that the keyboard goes into, but there are like different kinds of case mounting options as well. Some of them actually, modern ones use like rubber gaskets, so they actually like mechanically isolate the keyboard from the case itself, so that alters the finger feel and the sound of it. Again,
Does this work? Okay.
Good.
You lied to me, Arti. It was supposed to last a long time. It didn't even make it through like whatever 5 slides. Okay, so going back a bit, the next thing you're going to need for your keyboard is a PCB. Basically, the PCB usually is just defines the size as well, so you need to select it accordingly. Is it the 65%, 75%, whatever? And the main differences are what kind of switch mounting you want. Do you want the switches to be soldered, or do you want them to be hot swappable, so you can just like remove or put one in? I have a hot swappable in here, and I do not like it. All of the keys are crooked. I can't like adjust them. With a solderable one, and I can just like play around with the soldering iron and get them all straight. But these are all crooked, and like at least 3 of them occasionally do not make contact, and I just want to get rid of it, but I can't find the non-hot swappable version of this PCB anymore, so it's I'm stuck with it. Might just consider cleaning it or something. There's also like different choices between RGB LEDs or just other or backlight as well. So there can be PCBs with just underglow lighting or with individual key lighting and all that thing. There's just tons of options out there. One thing to keep in mind is that the PCB also for the most part defines what kind of a case you can install it in and what kind of mounting options there are. Usually a lot of the stuff is sold in kits as well, but they can also be bought separately, but that's something that needs to be considered, is where you can mount it and how. And yeah. Another thing you're gonna need is stabilizers. So all the keys with the long all the really long keys, if you want you need a stabilizer that actually makes it so that if you press on one of the corners, the entire key goes down. Otherwise, if you didn't have one, it would just rock and it wouldn't press, and it would be just a sad experience all around. Nothing too special about them, but there's so tons of options. Main difference being that either they're plate mounted, mounted on the back plate, which I'll get to next, or screwed into the PCB. I prefer to have the screwed in ones because they usually have less compatibility issues. The plate mounted ones, they really depend on whether they actually like fit in the plate or do not, or maybe they're just like completely loose.
There's also there's also clip-in stabilizers, pretty much just screw in, but instead of screwing them into the holes, they clip into the smaller holes here.
Oh yeah, so there's like also they can be screwed in. They don't have to be. There's like again like tons of different options.
They both screw-ins and clip-ins work with the same holes, so functionally there's no difference.
Going back a bit, something I also should mention is with PCBs is you don't necessarily have to buy one actually ready-made. PCBs are actually fairly simple designs, so there are actually lots of open source designs. And you could, if you really wanted to, you could like build one completely from scratch or get a PCB from like from PCBWay or whatever, and that's technically also an option. There's just also infinite customizability. So backplate. So I'll just try to show how it's mounted here. So the idea of a backplate is actually, while the switches, they solder onto the PCB, and they're actually hard on the PCB, you don't need a backplate, but it's usually a good idea to have one because the switches actually sit inside the backplate, and that makes the whole thing a lot less wobbly and a lot more sturdy. So if you wouldn't have a backplate, the switches would be slightly more wobbly, and it would again completely alter the finger feel of the keyboard. Usually, again, like with PCBs and cases, they usually come in a kit, and they're usually meant not all that intercompatible, but you know. But there is some compatibility between different manufacturers and different styles, but it's wild. So you got all the things, and your keyboard should look something like this. So the idea is you have a PCB on the bottom, switches soldered onto the PCB, and the backplate in between them. Also, this one doesn't have the stabilizers installed, but yeah, the stabilizers are also between the PCB and the backplate, and these need to be installed before you start soldering switches, because you cannot remove them and put them back after the switches are on, because they're stuck between the PCB and the backplate. Maybe there are designs that don't have these limitations, but I don't know. Pretty much I think all of them have that. So something you also need to consider is that where and how long the kinds of stabilizer you're going to use, because depending on the layout and the size and everything, you can have different sizes of different sizes of the long keys, and you can also have different sizes of like pretty much everything. So that determines like what backplate, what stabilizer where you're going to screw. It's a rabbit hole. So what you see on the picture here is just some kit I found on Amazon. It's some kind of a cheaper Chinese manufactured kit, and this is usually what is sold as a kit. So from here you can choose your own switches and all the keycaps as well. So I'll get to that next. Switches, yeah. So after Cherry's patent expired, pretty much everybody started making different switches. So like I mentioned, the three basic different kinds: linear, tactile, and clicky, and all kinds of combinations in between. The mechanical keyboard enthusiasts usually don't consider Cherry ones to be their favorites, but I don't know. I don't know how much there is to say about it. It's really just a case of you need to try some of them. There's not too many differences between them, but if you can, this is a screenshot of like some store selling like a set of different ones you can try out. It's really just a matter of finding the ones you like. So. As I said, the tactile feel of the switch, the weight of the switch, and also between different manufacturers and product lines, there's differences between just build quality, how good they are, how different they are from each other. So if you get like a pack of 10 switches, are they all the same, or do they all feel different? Something to consider is like scratchiness. Cherry switches are known to be quite scratchy, so if you're going up down, it's going to go not the case for all switches, and also switch material has an effect. So mis see materjal on pomm, millest tehakse need kõige peenemad? So there are some kinds of plastics, for example, that don't subject them well to wave soldering, so they can't be mass-produced keyboards with these materials. But like handmade keyboards can use them, and they have again slight differences between them. So that also affects the feel, so that they're also like a lot more expensive. So again, there's tons of options out there. Start with Cherry and maybe try something else if in the future. Keycaps. So to summarize real quickly, keycaps go on top of the keys on the switches. Cherry MX just uses this plus-shaped stem for it. They should all be intercompatible. Keycaps are usually made from either of two materials, so is either ABS or PBT, different kinds of plastic, different feels. I have both of them here, and also using different manufacturing methodologies. So the fairly common ones are double shot keycaps or dye sublimated. So double shot is where two different colors of plastic are like injection molded together to form a keycap. Dye sublimation is just one keycap with the text printed on top, but it's not just like printed on the top, it's actually like the ink sort of absorbs into the keycap. The most common ones are double shot ABS and dye sublimated PBT, but there's like also different combinations, like double shot PBT is also a thing I've seen. I think these are double shot PBT if I remember them correctly. But yeah, and usually the cheaper gaming keyboards also use some kind of transparent plastic that's like paint coated and laser etched, so that makes them transparent for RGB underglow, and they also really cheap to make. Again, all the like common gaming keyboards are usually built for cheapness, not necessarily the best typing experience. Keycaps also have or come in like tons of different shapes. Lauri's laughing. I told you it's gonna be rabbit holes all the way down. Yeah. So with the original Model F and Model M keyboards, the keyboards usually have a sort of a bow to them. So with the original Model M and F keyboards, they used to be actually placed on a physical metal plate that was actually bowed. But on modern keyboards, the keyboard itself is actually flat, and the profile of it is just from the keycaps themselves. The most common ones are the Cherry and the OEM ones, and also the SA ones. So these are these here are SA keycaps. These are like really tall and really sculpted, and they're like completely different feeling from each other. And as with always, there are like tons of different options out there. Personally, what I also had at one point, I think it was the XDA ones, and these are flat. So if these have like a curve to them, these are some of them are also flat, and they also feel completely different. Again, tons of options out there. So yeah, with some of the profiles also, the shape and the profile of the keycap also, for as a fun fact, defines a little bit of how they can be manufactured. So that's why like some combinations of materials and keycap profiles are very common. And yeah, so this is like usually what the keycap set is like advertised as. So like the different colors and usually what kind of a profile it has and what kind of rows they have. So usually you don't just have like the like a common keycap like set. Usually what you have is say a full-size keycap set, and then just the whole different kinds of like modifier keys and combinations and options that can be used for different keyboards. For example, because every row of keys is different, you can't just take one key from the top row and put it to the bottom row. If you want to have like, say, page down over here, you need to have, your keycap set needs to have like a page down key for this row. You can't like, and usually like page up and page down is something that like, usually premium kits have like quite a lot of different options for different rows. And yeah, something that some sellers also sell separately is just usually how it goes. You usually have like a base kit, and then you can buy like different sets of like more exotic combinations as well. So something that I've seen recently more as kits is like combinations for different languages. And so one of them being like the Nordic layout, so you can have keycaps for the Nordic layouts as well. Something I'm going to come to next is the keyboard layout. So this is actually not specific to mechanical keyboards. This is just regular keyboards apply to this as well. Keyboards actually, the top keyboard is usually considered the American layout, but that's not strictly speaking true. Keyboards actually have two different layouts. It's the physical layout of the keyboard and the what we call the language layout of the keyboard. So the physical layout is either ANSI or ISO. There are others as well, like Japanese and whatnot, but these are the most common ones here in Europe at least. The ANSI is the American National Standards Institute, I think, and ISO is the International Standards Organization. These are just standard layouts for keyboards. They're actually almost the same, with just the red keys being slightly different. And these actually do not define the language layout, but because the ANSI is the American standard layout, it's also the most commonly used for the US language layout as well. So usually ANSI is synonymous with the US layout, but it doesn't actually have to be, and so goes for the ISO layouts as well. And yeah, so on top of the physical layout, you can actually have like a different language layouts as well. So here's just a difference between, say, an American layout and the what is the Swedish and Finnish layout, which is also almost identical to the Estonian layout. Just the Estonian Ö letter is missing from here. And personally, I don't like the Estonian layout. I got used to the American layout, and I like it a lot more because just for one thing, it has all the symbols you use for programming right at the fingertips, like no 3 layers of modifiers to get to like, I don't know, a bracket. And also because I use Linux a lot, I also use the / quite a lot. And this is like right underneath one of the fingers. On the Estonian layout, it's under like Shift-7 modifier combination. I guess I should also mention that, yeah, if you're going to build your own keyboard, finding US ANSI keycaps is a hell of a lot easier than finding ISO or Estonian or whatever other layout keycaps. And that's also a small part of why I went to the US layout. And I started with Estonian layouts, and once at some point I decided, hey, I'll try this. People keep using this, and then I was like, this is a lot better. Like honestly, it's not even that so much that the Estonian layout is bad. It's just that the Nordic layout that it's like based on is just so weird. It's so different from what the ISO or like the UK layout and the American layouts are. But I don't necessarily understand why. Why does everything have to be like completely moved around? Why does everything have to be like shifted one key to the left? It doesn't make sense. I understand you need to make room for 4 more letters, but it's like you don't need to like change half the keyboard for that. And yeah, if anybody's wondering, there's a really nice keyboard software layout where you can use an American layout, but still have the Estonian diacritical letters under one modifier key. So that's kind of nice. So you just use the right Alt key and just get the Ö from there.
US keyboard with Estonian letters.
Yeah, that's also included in the stock Ubuntu, and is also there's a magical XF file that somebody made like 10 years ago that you can get from, I think it was Have Forum, and that actually installs the same layout in a Windows machine as well. I use it. It's really nice. And yeah, software-wise, the software of a keyboard is basically entirely customizable. Usually when you get a PCB, it has the firmware installed, and all the regular keys, all the letter keys should work fine, but usually you run into trouble with all the modifier keys and all the other function keys and all that, because they can be in slightly different positions. So it's more than likely that you're going to flash a your custom software on it. And just as an example of something that exists is the QMK firmware. So that's designed for usually for the AT Mega 32U4. So that's an Atmel chip that is very commonly used on the keyboards. It's also used in a couple of Arduinos, and what makes it special is that it has native support for USB, so that's very commonly used for keyboards because it could just act as a USB device. And because it's just a very common chip, you can actually, if you really wanted to, you could just write one completely from scratch, but you can or just get like a ready-made firmware on it. And but they're not all the same. There are other manufacturers, other chips, and other systems as well. Just the QMK is what I've been working with. There's like also tons of like configuration softwares and everything for it. It's a rabbit hole, and you can pretty much like custom do anything. And if you really wanted to, I actually for the lols, I actually once compiled the keyboard firmware myself, because I needed to write a really a bit of a complicated macro. So here's a fun story. A while back at work, I had a problem that we had a machine that somebody misconfigured that it would shut itself down. So it was an offline machine, just a computer, and it was misconfigured so that like after I think 60 seconds it would shut down, or it would just shut down because it was somebody made a shutdown command, but it like triggered at the wrong time. So what we had, like I think 5 or 10 seconds to log in the prompt, type in your username, the password, hit enter, and just either like remove the shutdown command or do anything else to stop the shutdown from happening. Otherwise we couldn't update the software on it because it would keep shutting down on us. And after a quick rounds of like fast fingers, we figured out that no, we're not gonna be able to like type in the password, the username and the password so quickly enough to like stop this from happening. So instead was like, I can program my keyboard. Can I like program in the key presses of the username, the password, and the command to like stop the shutdown from happening? It's like 10 minutes later, yes, I did that. Basically, yes. I think the rubber ducky is also based on the AT Mega 32U4. It basically achieves.
Depends on the ducky.
Yeah. It's the same thing. It's just a controller that acts as a keyboard. So yeah, basically just a keyboard macro later, and the machine didn't shut down anymore. And we all had a good laugh. So this actually concludes the slides. Any questions? There's probably a lot of questions considering the topic.
Anyone else wants to talk about something?
Yeah,
From live stream, or you want to show something?
I can show like my own stuff, but I don't know if you want to like live stream it, because like people watching can't like touch these, so there's not much point.
I can talk a little bit about my Model S.
Oh yeah, come talk about that thing. That thing's amazing. So yeah, in short summary, so IBM stopped making those. They stopped making the Model F and they sold the rights to Model M, and there's a company that actually makes Model M's still.
Patents expired.
For the Model F?
Yes.
Okay, and yeah, but the patents expired for the Model F, and somebody decided, was like, hey, let's make these from scratch, and that's absolutely crazy.
Yeah, there are a couple of people. There's Unicomp who makes like all the Model M's and who makes Model M's and stuff, and there's also like an independent project, I believe, Model F keyboards that just makes.
Yes,
Yeah, that's that.
Yes, yes.
I think actually before you start, just paar asja veel. So yeah, something I actually forgot to like mention is where do you get all this stuff? And truth be told, I haven't bought anything for like 2 years. And this keyboard I finished a year ago, and I haven't done anything others since then. The thing is, I have all the keyboards I need right now, and I don't have much point in making any more. For all the electronic components, the switches, the PCB, and the key and the backplates and all that, there are tons of different manufacturers and options out there. Usually sold in kits. You can either find them like on dedicated keyboard shops or on Amazon or AliExpress or whatever. Price usually determines quality, and for the keycaps, there are usually two options. Either they're sort of not necessarily mass-produced, but like in stock produced, like keycap sets that are usually always kept in stock, usually made in larger quantities, and you can either buy those or you can participate in what is known as a group buy. So because the manufacturers have like a minimum quantity that they would like to make for it to make sense. Usually what they do is they get a bunch of people together, like, hey, we want to buy this, and then they make some kind of a design, and they actually get the manufacturer to make that, and then you will eventually get your keycap set. And what makes them usually unique is that they're usually just one-off runs. So if you get like a keycap set from a group buy, there's not going to be any more like that. So it's going to be fairly unique. This keycap set I have here is actually part of a group buy, and it from purchase from like down payment to like actually getting these, I think it was like over a year. So it's a very long process because they actually need to. This also happened somewhere during COVID, so manufacturing times were a little bit off. But even if they weren't, they would still be like something like a year. So it's there's a lot of waiting involved, but there's also a bit of like excitement. It's like, ooh, they finally arrived, and they're quite nice. And but yeah, also. If you want to get started with these, I think the best place in general is just the Reddit mechanical keyboard subreddit, and also a really great place to buy secondhand stuff is the Reddit mechanical keyboard market subreddit. So you can all go check those out. I think. You will have to check computer stores. I just saw that Arvutitark is actually selling some keyboard related stuff. Usually they're also like the in stock more mass produced stuff, and usually not too special, yeah. But like I said, it's been 2 years since I like actually looked at any of this stuff, and from what I've gathered, it has gotten a lot better since, and there's a lot more options and a lot more availability and. For everything these days.
If you want to buy stuff from an Estonian store, then you're pretty much out of luck, because the things you see in Arvutitark and such, I'm pretty sure it's just one manufacturer, Glorious, and that's pretty much it. But there are a bunch of stores in Europe that you can buy from. So yeah, it's not
rabbit holes.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Possibly. I guess I will come here. I don't have pretty slides like Karel had. I just gonna talk a little bit my crazy story about buying a 500 euro keyboard. Hopefully I can show the screen. Did it die? Will it work? Will something happen? Something happened. Yes. You can have that. I don't need it. What is it? Number 3. Yes. So, you can have that. And yes, so the year was, I think, 2017, or maybe it's 16. And I had my cherry blue keyboard for some time, but it was loud and not that exciting, and all the crazy keyboards were starting to come out, including the Model F keyboard by a crazy US guy who took the original patents and started producing all the tooling for it from scratch, and basically everything from scratch. The springs, he figured out the spring material, the metal composition of the springs to make it sound exactly the same, like exactly the same as it sounded in the 1980s when the last Model F was produced. And like everything else had to be as close as possible. So, and during that time he had this awesome project page, and I think, yes, it still has here that you have to have your order in by that time, and he updated that date every month for 6 years. But I was like gullible and didn't know that, and I really wanted something like more special and exciting than just another Cherry MX clone or something. So I basically ordered it, didn't know if it would arrive at some point. He promised like half a year. It took, I think, 3 years for him to produce it. And the build quality, like he says, is built to last for decades, not years. And I actually believe him, because this thing, I don't know if the stream can see it, but it's heavy. It's like 3 kilograms of pure metal, and really loud noises. Thankfully, I didn't have a girlfriend at the time, so that was possible to buy. I would not recommend it to do it again. Another thing that I discovered after getting the keyboard was that it is really loud. Surprise, surprise. I read it that it is loud, but I didn't think that it would be that loud. And in open office environment, I got quite a lot of comments from other side of the building that what the fuck, what you doing? But yeah, for some of the people that have bought the keyboard, they think it's still too quiet, so there's an extra option to add a solenoid hammer inside the case. For each time you press the key, there's a hammer that bangs to make it even louder. I don't get them.
It's also part of the, we really used to use typewriters.
Yes, that's yeah, that's why it's really loud. But yeah, so as I said, the keyboard is really expensive because it's produced by a guy in China, and it's limited quantities.
Well,
so
to be fair, it was never built to be cheap. The entire design of the keyboard was never cheap. So
yeah,
the fact that this doesn't cost $600 today necessarily is actually just amazing.
oh yeah, the fun thing is that it cost $500 in the 80s and still costs $500 today.
Yes.
It has gotten much cheaper,
Yes.
but the number is still the same, which is kind of funny. But yeah, okay, other cool things about it. As Carl said, most of the keyboards use the same 80 mega microcontroller, including this one. So it is fully programmable, and you can basically game on it and do whatever. You don't want to do it, but you can. Do the layers and all the extra features that you might want to do it. And if someone actually wants to buy it, then the guy has updated the page a little bit and now has a actually real-sized model Model M-sized keyboards available with proper layouts, because mine is replicating the Model F layout exactly. So it has the modifier keys on the side, or actually I think it was numpad that was originally supposed to be here. And it doesn't have the F rows and all the extra fancy keys that the Model M has. So yeah, I think if anyone wants to get it, get the Model M variant of it. Probably the.
Nice is the display. They don't have the price below. That means he doesn't sell them right now, or?
I think those are yes, part of the Kickstarter style thing that he does sometimes. So those probably don't have. I think we can check what's the out of stock. Okay, so. But yeah, because now he has the tooling, he can make really high quality Model F reproductions, which is nice. Compared to the, what was it, the other company? Unicomp, that actually bought the original IBM tooling. Compared to that, the Model Fs are much tighter tolerance because the tooling is brand new. The Unicomp tooling, as far as I understand, is or heard, is that it's really loose. And the keys are a lot more wobble than they should be. But they're also cheaper. Unicomps are only $100 instead of $300 plus shipping. That was $70 plus the import tax was also like $80 on top of that. So in total, it's like almost 500. Yes, but yeah, it's really loud. Don't recommend it for office use, and instead of that I just built my own custom AliExpress keyboards that I use all the time, and this now just collects dust in my cupboard.
It collects bragging rights.
Yeah, it collects bragging rights. Like I can take it out of the box for events like this and like say that yeah, I have the really loud keyboard. I think for that I need to buy the bigger case, because this is the compact version, the light version. There's a magnesium case that is actually much larger and even heavier, and yeah, basically yeah. But yeah, it has like a proper bezels where you can put a hammer inside. But yeah, there's a like literal hammer.
It's literally like a solenoid hammer that kicks against the keyboard such that it feels like somebody's banging a hammer on it.
Like a typewriter.
Like a typewriter, yeah.
No. The bell, I think those don't have the bell option. I know that the Model M's had a speaker bell thing on the bottom, but this one doesn't have it. You can probably program it to do the bell, because it's open source software, so do whatever. But yeah, I don't think I'm gonna spend any more money on this project because it's rabbit hole. There's so much things that I could do it, but with it. But yeah, so that was my little story about the Model F. Cool keyboard. It really feels nice though. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Questions? Anyone else who wants to talk? Maybe you can switch it to the full screen view.
Is this thing on? Is it? Okay. So yeah, so Arti kept mentioning costs, so I thought I'd like just to scare like people away, I want to go like down the rundown of the costs of what it costs to make one of these. So by far the most expensive thing is the keycaps themselves, because while they may look simple, they're actually like fairly complicated thing to manufacture, especially with the double shot ones, because each keycap has to be its own mold. Or it can be like a big mold with all the keycaps inside it, but each keycap has to be molded separately. And tooling for these things is not necessarily cheap. So a good quality keycap as part of a group buy can usually costs at least €100. I think these keycaps I have here are slightly more like mass manufactured and a bit more kept in stock, and these are slight like $100 and maybe a little bit less, and these are like double shot ABS. But yeah, usually like a good keycap set is going to be at least 100. I think the
You can the price of keycaps has actually come down quite a bit. You can get like a GMK clone on AliExpress for like, I don't know, 20 euros.
yeah, but
20 euro keycaps.
yeah, but
And it's already coming off.
yeah, exactly. The thing is though is they tend to be worth the price. You can really tell that the price and the quality of the thing usually go in hand, and usually you can cheap out, but you're gonna feel it. It's
Well, depends on the manufacturer, because if you buy like no name, I don't know, ABS showing through 1 cent welcome deal or something. Then
yeah. There's gonna be yeah. Okay, it has gotten better, but the point is they're expensive, and don't try to cheap out. They're going to be expensive anyway. It's gotten better, but you know, it's still.
What about ceramic keycaps?
I don't know. I just saw the headline. I can't even imagine. Seems crazy, but yeah. So yeah, that's. I can find a piece of paper here. Let's try this. So yeah, that's say 100 euros just for the keycaps. So switches. So if you just look at the price of one switch, it's like that, depending on the switch, usually like 50 cents to like $1 or even more. Depends on the switch. Cheaper ones can be even cheaper than that, like 20 cents per switch.
you can actually get very good cheap switches nowadays.
Yeah, you can get cheap ones, but you know, I'm trying to get like what like a normal cost would be if you're not cheaping out on everything necessarily.
It's not really like you can't spend like $2 on a switch, but for most
Yeah, but that's like the higher end. But you also don't want to get the like cheapest thing. So
these were like I don't know 20-30 cents a piece. Gator yellows.
yeah, okay. So yeah, the Gatorun is one of the cheaper. I think cherry ones are which are the like common ones are something around 40 to 50 cents per switch, which doesn't seem that much, but like on a keyboard like this, that's 100 switches. This one has 87, I think, something like that, and usually packs in 10s can be 100 switches. That's also going to be like another 50 euros. Great, we don't even have a PCB yet. So PCBs are usually fairly cheap because they're fairly simple things actually, and they're fairly easily mass produced. Same goes for backplates. So that's usually 50 euros for the PCB and the backplate, but depends on, again, like RGB and all other kinds of things. This keyboard actually has a brass backplate for the extra weight. I thought it was stupid, but I really like it. It feels really nice. But that's going to be another like 50 euros. And then you're going to get the stabilizers are cheap, usually like maybe 10, 20, something like that. Not a lot.
You
Or even less.
You can get plate mounts for 10 euros, but they're usually not good unless you put a crap ton of work into them.
Again,
You can get pretty good quality ones for like 20.
don't necessarily cheap out. It's going to be an expensive hobby regardless. Yeah. And for like a case, well, I decided that a case I can actually make myself. So I've been making wooden cases for quite a while. So if you want one, you can get one. But yeah, I decided to do that partly because aluminum cases were really expensive. So nowadays I've seen a lot more like cheap plastic cases as well. But like a decent like CNC milled aluminum is also going to be like at least $100. So I'm just going to add that here. And so what's the grand total? 100, 150, 200, 300, 310. So just to get the keyboard going, they're going to be at least $300, which with import tax is gonna be about the same as 300 euros. I don't know what the going rate is today, but it's going to be crazy. So there's like over $1,000 worth of keyboard right on this table here now. So yeah, fun.
Okay, now let's hear about the cheaper versions.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Seal on rist on su keskel põrandal käsi ees.
Yeah. So you can get keyboards much cheaper nowadays actually because yes, I have no script. I just came here impromptu.
Position the mic.
Correctly, yes. yes, switches and keycaps have gotten pretty cheap nowadays, actually, and well, PCBs have stayed pretty much the same price, but that's pretty much, yeah. You can get good switches for pretty much 20 cents a piece or so nowadays. I have some here. These are Gateron yellows. These are pretty much the gold standard for a cheap linear switch. Tactiles. I know there are some Acco CS stuff, but cheap tactiles usually aren't that good, and yeah, clickies are the same thing pretty much. Yes, and and keycaps. These these are yes. So pretty much what keycaps are like nowadays is that usually there's a group by the more higher quality or name brand stuff like GMK or such are done in group buys. These are the ones that cost. These are the ones that Karel spoke about. That cost like €100 or such. And then on AliExpress there are a bunch of clones. And these ones, these are GMK Evil Doll clones, a set, black and red set. These were about 30, 40 euros, and these are DICE PVT. No, PVT pretty much means that it lasts longer than ABS. ABS pretty much the legends, and yeah, and yeah. And PCBs, these are pretty much the same price, but I made these PCBs myself. I designed these PCBs myself. I have another 4 over there.
Usually the minimum order quantity is like 10. So
5 actually.
Oh yeah, for this size maybe, yeah, but for like a small, if you're making a smaller thing, usually PCBs is like you're gonna get 10, no less.
Yeah, and I also got some. And I also got plates made. There are a bunch of different plate materials. You can also get plates made from the same material as PCBs. So this is fiberglass FR4. And you can get these made at a PCB manufacturer too, which is pretty funny because this is like this has literally zero logic on it. This is zero traces. This is literally just the fucking sorry. This is literally just a cutout. So yeah, 5 PCBs and 5 cases with shipping and import taxes ran me about 120 euros. But well, if you're ordering just singles, then yeah, as Karel said, the PCB and plate's gonna run you about 50 euros. And as for a case, it depends. If you're going for it usually depends on what keyboard you're going for, since you know there are kits out there with kits usually kits usually have cases of their own, and you can't use some other case because every keyboard has different mounting points. But there are also some different. There's also some standards out there. For instance, for 60% boards. It's quite easy to find a matching PCB and case because there is standard out there. Although again there are a bunch of different other options for mounting points and such.
Mounting also depends not just on the PCB but the backplate as well, and so that can also make a difference.
Yes.
What mounting points do you have, and
Yes.
what are cases?
Yes, but yeah, you can and you. You can just 3D print the case and that.
Or if you can get a wooden one, that's good.
Yeah. Or you can get a wooden one, yeah. Oh, okay.
üks inimene paneb mikri mute'i, teine lülitab mikri välja. ma ei tea.
Okay, never mind.
Yeah, you can get cases 3D printed too. You can get cases 3D printed too if it's an open source design, which yeah it's cheap. So
So far, do you have ordered the cases from some 3D printing place, or how have you done the cases?
I was going to bring a case here, but I screwed up on that. So there, yes, I tried to do it. I tried to do it yesterday. I set the print going. I went on a walk, came back 45 minutes later. There's a giant piece of plastic around the nozzle. And yeah, that's that. So yeah, you can get them made yourself, or you can buy them from somewhere, or you can get them printed at a service. So yeah, and you can actually, and aluminum cases have even come down in price. Yeah, there are kits right now that have an aluminum case, and you know, and all the fancy stuff like gasket mounts, which feel better, and all that stuff. You can get that. You can get a kit for below 100 euros for that nowadays, that even has an aluminum case, and you can and then you can get keycaps and switches for like 50 euros pretty much if you want decent ones, and yeah, that's that, and that's 150 euros, which is still a lot to spend on a keyboard, but
Considering if you can get like a complete cheap gaming mechanical keyboard for like maybe 50 euros?
cheaper even. There's
But maybe like a semi-respectable brand, like
yeah. Yeah,
Those weren't those like rubber dome but fancy?
no, they actually have like very cheap ones,
really?
actual mechanical ones.
yeah, you can get some from a cheap Chinese brand for like 30, 40 euros.
One like with actual like name brand switches, it's gonna be usually at least 50 euros or more.
Oh, well, yes, and yeah.
Even if you get like large quantity pricing, the cherry switch. What makes cherry keyboards particularly more expensive is the switches themselves are actually manufactured in Germany, not cheap Chinese manufacturing. So that just makes the switches alone quite expensive already.
Great. So the live stream.
Does he?
Yeah,
Does he?
I was going to say more, but I can't really think of anything. So
Yeah.
yes. Okay.
Yeah. I think most of the information that we have talked today is in GasBase wiki, wiki.gasbase.de, and yes, we have samplers here.
Yeah, we have the sampler.
The
Well,
sampler.
actually, there's like an insane amount of switch makers, so this is probably like not all of the possible switches, but at least like more of the common manufacturers. So, and you can get like a feel of what they feel like.
Yes, and thank you for the viewers. And now we were gonna have touchy-feely fun with the keyboards.
Switch